Are we in the United States being subjected to a psychological operation?
What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country.
Welcome back to the channel, folks. Dr. Sharma here, physician, board-certified psychiatrist, and Air Force veteran. Now, buckle up, folks. This is going to be an interesting ride. I'm going to be presenting you all with some information, some concepts, and a question. And I genuinely want to hear from you all because I don't know the answer. The question is whether or not we as Americans are being subjected to a psyop or psychological operation. I'm going to be splicing in parts of an interview from a KGB defector named Yuri Bezmenov, along with other research. First, before we get started, I'm not saying that I agree with every part of this gentleman's interview, if you go and watch the whole thing, but I think he brings up some excellent points that are extremely relevant to what has been going on in our country for a while. Also, this video does not lean either way when it comes to politics. This actually transcends our traditional political discourse, okay? So keep that in mind and keep an open mind. This topic is relevant to the channel because it deals with psychology and mental health. It's also relevant to both veterans and non-veterans alike. However, we as veterans have a special understanding of covert operations because of our training and some of our exposures to the intelligence community. As a reminder, a psychological operation refers to using communication, media, influence to manipulate the thoughts, emotions, and behaviors of a target audience. This can be enemy forces or civilian populations. The goal involves military objectives and may include misinformation, disinformation, which is intentional, propaganda, and more. The main thing is to sway public opinion in a particular direction. Let's dive in. We have to talk about something called ideological subversion.
Ideological subversion, what it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in four basic stages.
Something key he said is, despite the abundance of information, we see this going on now, and it has been for a while. We have all the information in the world available to us. What used to be contained in multiple bookshelves of encyclopedias is now in our phones, right in our hands. However, despite this access to information, there is so much misinformation and disinformation that we don't know what is fact or what is fiction. As a result, we actually lose trust in our information sources. This happens with the media when it comes to news. One news source may report one thing while another reports the complete opposite. We might see a headline about a war going on in a foreign country, but we're seeing social media videos showing us a different reality there. There might be conflicting information when we see footage from people on the ground versus what is being reported in the mainstream media. It is extremely confusing, and it can make us as citizens feel paralyzed about what to do with the information we have. Not to mention that the sheer abundance of information can make us feel numb from a cognitive and emotional standpoint. A lot of people, including veterans, tell me this, that they feel overwhelmed by the media. This includes general media and social media. So they tend to avoid these things altogether. They recognize that they won't be as informed about world events as they used to be, but it's the only thing they can do to survive. This has been shown in studies over and over again, where people are exposed to excessive amounts of information, they experience emotional fatigue, decision paralysis, and they just can't act. Or other studies showing that prolonged exposure to negative or crisis-driven news, which is extremely common today in the 24-hour news cycle, can lead to compassion fatigue and emotional detachment, even problems with mood and anxiety. According to Bezmenov, this first stage of ideological subversion is called demoralization, And I believe this overabundance of information is a big part of it.
The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years. Actually, it's overfulfilled because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards.
I started thinking about what else this could be referring to. There's a common feeling among a lot of people I talk to, including veterans, that our political system is so severely polarized that there literally is no middle ground or compromise to anything. It's right versus left, red versus blue, with no room for anything else. You either hop on this bandwagon or the other. And this is so bad that there are people who will literally cut ties with someone based on their political leaning. Now, I'm not blaming one person or the other here. I'm talking about the effects or impacts of this. When it comes to the psychological standpoint, this causes one thing: division. When you put one portion of the country against another, these two sides are so busy in the conflict, it becomes right versus left rather than the populace versus whoever is running this psychological operation. One other feeling in the general population that we notice is that there are multiple facets of our country that have been eroded. This includes our health insurance industry, which obviously got spotlighted recently because of the United Healthcare CEO. Our food industry, which puts ingredients into our food that are banned in other countries. Corporations cutting corners like Boeing, which leads to deaths of our people. The military-industrial war complex that profits from perpetual wars that put us and our sons and daughters in the military at risk. All of these issues cause us to feel demoralized. We feel so down and suppressed that we don't know what to do or how we can even go about solving the country's problems. It just seems like it's too much for us to try to solve. It's like looking up at a Goliath and just feeling completely overwhelmed. We can certainly say that this demoralization has happened or is ongoing. There's also this concept that Bezmenov gets into about information overload and how we can't separate reality from fiction.
Exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures.
We can see this exact thing happening when it comes to either side of the political spectrum. These days, you really aren't able to change anyone's mind. People are solidified into what they believe, they've chosen their side already, and they're not budging. Even if you want them to come to a middle ground. I'm not saying you want someone to change their political party or base ideology. I'm saying even if you try to get them to come to a compromise, it's extremely difficult and at this point pretty much impossible. This is also because of all of us being in our own bubbles when it comes to ideology. These are also referred to as filter bubbles. Let's say we scroll videos on social media. This might be TikTok, Instagram Shorts, YouTube Reels. The algorithm gradually narrows our videos more and more over time. It filters in content we want to see and content we agree more with. It will show us videos painting our viewpoints as being right and others' viewpoints as being wrong. Same when it comes to political leaders. Our entire ideology is shaped by these filter bubbles. And if we're shown evidence to the contrary, meaning contrary to our beliefs, we experience discomfort in our minds because it doesn't make sense with everything we've been watching and listening to. This cognitive dissonance, as it's called, is extremely difficult to reconcile. And at the end of the day, it becomes right versus left instead of up versus down, meaning we fight each other instead of fighting to hold those in power accountable, those with political power and economic power. Psychologically, this is extremely powerful because it pits people against each other and it also ensures that meaningful change doesn't occur and those in power stay in power. Then we go to the next step, destabilization. Now keep in mind, Bezmenov talks about all these stages from the viewpoint of Marxist-Leninist ideology taking over. That's not what I'm referring to. I'm using his base concepts of ideological subversion to figure out if this is going on right now, at least from a psychological standpoint in our country.
The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation, what matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems.
Now, in this one, the entity who is doing the subversion focuses on disrupting these different parts of the government. Now, I'm not smart enough to speak on this when it comes to an overall policy level, but psychologically, I can see how the divide in people's viewpoints about these issues are so extreme, no matter where you look. For instance, in the economy, it's either complete deregulation and free-for-all for corporations to do whatever they want, or extreme regulation where freedom is compromised, or law enforcement where it's either completely defund the police or give them military-grade equipment meant for withstanding IED explosions. And in foreign relations where it's completely allying with other countries blindly no matter what they do versus completely destroying these relationships. Now listen, I'm not saying I'm going either way with this when it comes to politics. I'm talking about the divide and what that does psychologically to us as a people. Basically, it creates societal instability and an overall mistrust in our leadership. Now, the last two phases are crisis and normalization.
The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda. When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in '68, Comrade Brezhnev said, "Now the situation in brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized." This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis, to promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth.
I'm not going to explore these too much because I don't know enough about these concepts and the current situation to comment on them, at least from a psychological standpoint. It seems like either these stages have already occurred or they will happen in the future. I'm not sure. You can watch his interview in full or read about his stages online and let us know in the comments. Those of you veterans out there with experience in PsyOps, chime in. Your thoughts on this are important.
It's the same pattern everywhere. The time bomb is ticking with every second.
Now, at the end of the day, I do know one thing. It's not all doom and gloom. Yes, there are things happening that are concerning, no doubt about it, certainly from a satellite view level. However, if we zoom in and go into our communities on the ground, there are plenty of opportunities for us to work together, rely on each other, and support each other. So there is hope, and there is a lot of it. The purpose of this video is not to get us down, but to make us more aware of what might be going on in our environment and to start a conversation. That's it for today's video. I hope this was helpful for you guys to take a deeper look at the question about whether or not we are the subjects of a psychological operation. I know this was a bit different from the usual, but it's extremely relevant to us as American citizens, veterans, and just generally people interested in psychology and mental health. From a psychological standpoint, it's fascinating, and we have to be aware of what is going on around us. If you found this helpful or interesting, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. It really helps, and it tells me that I'm doing something right. Also, please drop a comment below about your thoughts on the topic, and if you have requests on what to cover in the future, I'd be happy to make a video on it. As always, thank you for watching. Dr. Sharma signing off. See you next time.